Introspection is the way back from memory to sense and sensitivity. Not everybody does this. Many people rely on their own internal principles, internal models of reality, internal models of authority, and belief structures. So they become insensitive and fail to use half of their internal architecture. What I mean by internal architecture is mind, memory, sense, perception, conception, the felt sense of immediate experience, and everything between the brain and mind. The difference between the conditioned mind and the liberated, awakened mind comes down to how much of their internal architecture someone uses. It's important to understand that social conditioning requires you to develop an ego and to regard this ego as yourself. But this is just the most basic, superficial level of self which contains little or nothing from your being. The other thing social conditioning conditions you to do is to rely on others to replace your internal architecture. Whenever you experience despair, which is a very common human experience, you turn to others. You seek to give authority to others who you feel know better than you or can offer you a solution. When you don't know what to do, you often turn to an organization or institution. You turn to self-help books. You turn to social media and seek guidance and advice from other members of that platform. There are other ways that social conditioning makes you dependent on others and causes you to rely too much on your thinking. There's the whole question of religion and ideology, various belief systems, spirituality, philosophy, and so on. Then there's moral reasoning, which causes you to add additional layers of reality from your imagination through conjecture and label these additional layers of reality as good and bad, good and evil, right and wrong, and so on. Then there's the other mind games such as praise and blame, finding fault. So instead of doing some introspection and accepting reality for what it is, at face value, you're constantly bypassing and interjecting your own natural perception and sense with a constant stream of assumptions, thoughts and beliefs. My point here is that we have the ability to be self-conscious. We are capable of introspection. Through introspection we can examine and deconstruct our beliefs, examine our feelings, emotions and thoughts. Through this we can rediscover our senses, recover mental and perceptive clarity, and learn more about who we are on the level of real self and being. The only downside is the vulnerability you feel during introspection. But there is no evolution and growth without some vulnerability. You cannot realize truth without vulnerability. Therefore, in the context of mental clarity and sensitivity, introspection is incredibly important. This is like when you look at your reflection in a pool of water. If the surface of the water is smooth, you get an accurate reflection. But if the surface of the water has ripples or waves, the reflection will be distorted. Therefore, if there is cohesion and flow in your internal architecture, and there is order between perception, sense, memory and thought, then your mind will be clear. With a clear mind you will be able to perceive accurately both reality and yourself. But if your mind is distorted by beliefs, thoughts, assumptions, then your perception will be distorted and you will have a distorted perspective of yourself and reality. So many people blindly follow religion and other belief systems, even political ideologies, without ever understanding the sense of their beliefs or ever having examined them or why they believe such things. They simply identify with such beliefs out of tradition, or because they were taught, or simply stumbled on them and adopted with them. There are two issues here. The first issue is that clinging to any unnecessary attachment creates separateness and division. Most beliefs are unnecessary attachments which create separateness and division. Out of separateness and division we get trauma and suffering. This is why religion and politics fail to create the unity and consensus they claim to create, because attachment to a political or religious belief creates separateness and division. If you want unity, or connection between self and other, you have to let go of belief. The second issue is that by clinging to a belief or even a process of thinking you override or bypass sense and perception. You see, through sense and sensory perception you can access such things as extrasensory perception, intuition, and actually find your answers to whatever it is you're seeking from within. In seeking to connect to spirit and what is known as the Jivatman, you learn more about self, real self and your being. Being is a manifestation of existence and has its own reality. But many people are in denial of both these issues because they perceive their ego as their real self, never really look deeper, and so they're constantly seeking answers to their questions from elsewhere. But the more you look for answers and insight from others, the more you seek knowledge from elsewhere, the further away you become from understanding your being. And the more you get trapped in your ego, the less perceptive and less sensitive you become. Please understand that you are the only source of truth, and truth is realized from within. It cannot come from any other source. To understand reality for what it is, you need to be self-aware and somewhat consciously aware of your deeper being. To understand your deeper being, you need to be able to accurately perceive reality as it is, and not what you believe it to be or want it to be. This is always strictly between you and your environment. This is the basis of what is known as the mystical transaction. The mystical transaction is the relationship between your brain and your environment. This is not a case of knowing yourself because you cannot know yourself completely. You can only know something if you can understand something in its entirety. Knowledge is provisional and superficial. To get a deeper understanding of self and reality, you need introspection. You need to be able to feel and sense accurately what you are experiencing without any need for belief or thought. You need to at least be able to figure out what is a sensation and what is a thought. This can only come from clarity of perception and clarity of mind. Introspection, which is best done in solitude when you are alone, is where you find many things reveal themselves and you start to realize things. Realization something is the key to proper understanding. Some of these things which you realize come to you because you've been in denial and shutting off your senses and perception. But other things come to you, things you weren't aware of, new insight, and things which can only come from your deeper being. Many people misunderstand this and believe that self-realization is the objective, but it isn't. It's only the process. The objective is awareness of self and environment. But to go through that process of self-realization and introspection, you need an open mind, and an open mind is a vulnerable mind. You cannot realize anything from a closed and vulnerable mind or mental state. This just shuts you off from your perception and senses. Introspection is where you figure out what is real, and what is just a passing thought, and what passing thoughts you are clinging to and calling a belief. Introspection is where you break out of the invisible prison of ego and external authority. This is the path to liberation and personal autonomy.